There's been a massively controversial addition to Warhammer 40k, and it is all taking place just as Games Workshop have announced a huge price rise. And altogether, this threatens Warhammer's dominance of wargaming like never before. And now, I am super conflicted. Yep, it sure has been a week, so let me explain. I have been very vocal on this channel about one thing in particular, my most major, sincerely held belief, and it's probably the most important thing ever. Dark Eldar are the good guys of Warhammer 40k, and I'll die on that hill. I mean, look at them, they just wanna eat, dude. They just need to torture you a little so they can get off. Have a heart, self-harm for Dark Eldar. I think that's a pretty good pitch for them being the good guys. And if you are Dark Eldar, you might be eating quite well, because this week it was revealed by Games Workshop that they are doing some new models for the Drukhari faction. Yes, that's right, a model refresh for the Dark Eldar faction. The first since, what, 2010? Yeah, I think it's been that long. So this is great news, right? Well, no, actually, there's a lot more going on, and this has caused some really big issues. Issues that are so big, in fact, that they might actually be fatal to the Warhammer franchise, because Games Workshop have accidentally revealed a major issue for the future. One that means many people might want to abandon Warhammer and move over to Trench Crusade, or even the new Conflict 47 game from Warlord Games. Yeesh. So, okay, let's get into it. Starting with the good news, and then we're gonna move over to the nightmare, because Discourse Minis is a positive channel now, but you know, good positive, not HIV positive. Though for future court appearances, I want to be on the record, I'm not claiming in this video that I don't have AIDS. Anyway, like and subscribe to the channel. Here's a new Archon model. Yay! Huzzah! Woo! Yeah, I've been waiting a long time for this one, because infamously the previous Archon model kinda really definitely sucked. This is the old guy, this is our Dark Eldar Space Marine Captain model, except instead of getting 12 versions of them a year, we get one version of them every 12 years. And what we've had to work with has been, in a word, super lame. Just awkward posing, no customization, bizarre vampire LARP obfuscate stance. Everybody hated it. Believe me, I played Dark Eldar, I had to put up with these guys. It sucked, and everybody had like 5 of these models because they were in every single combat patrol. There's probably a landfill full of these somewhere right beside the ET cartridge mountain. Well, Games Workshop has finally had enough, and they are updating the Archon, and for inspiration, they've tried to replicate one of the best, greatest ever miniatures that has ever been sculpted, the Sauron-coded 2010 Dark Eldar Archon, and for good reason. That model is in my top 5 best models of all time. Just compare the new model that Games Workshop just revealed to the old one, and the inspiration is pretty clear. Now, there's a lot of criticism of this new Archon model. People are arguing that it isn't very good, but I mostly disagree. I really like this new miniature. It's a huge step up from what we had before. Though, please Games Workshop, why every time with the one foot up on a stone? Why with the slanted pose? Please have mercy on me. I can't make the same observation about tactical rocks anymore. It's driving me crazy, dude. But yeah, overall, I think the new Archon looks pretty rad. However, unfortunately, because Drukhari are being updated, that means a brand new combat patrol. Yeah, there's a new Dark Eldar Combat Patrol, and it fucking sucks. As per usual, being updated is bad for your faction in modern Warhammer. It's really lame and annoying and bizarre. The new Drukhari Combat Patrol comes with a homunculi and a bunch of racks. It's more of a sub-faction box compared to what we used to have before, which was basically, would you like one of everything you'll ever want? Yes, please! I would love one of everything I could ever want. The old Combat Patrol was just so much better. And again, Games Workshop got rid of it because Warhammer is becoming shitified and harder than ever to get into because there's just no good intro boxes for new players anymore because Games Workshop just want to destroy every single value box like Combat Patrol boxes. But don't worry, Games Workshop were very quick to advertise a brand new, limited time only Battle Force FOMO box for Dark Eldar that is likely going to be extremely expensive and be the only place that you can buy this new Archon for who knows how long. It's locked in there. It's just exclusive to that box for a time. And it's going to be even pricier to buy this than usual because guess what? Alongside these new models, Games Workshop also announced the Warhammer 40k is getting even more expensive. Again, it's like they want to give me a stroke. They have no mercy, dude. But a price rise right now is a major problem because it's already so hard to recommend Warhammer to new people. Prices are going up, there's more FOMO. Hell, these new character models, like for a single miniature, the price of them is creeping up to like $50 per figure. That's not sustainable, unlike fossil fuels. This video was brought to you by ExxonMobil. ExxonMobil, please stop associating us with truck stop blowjobs. But talking about blowing $50 on a tiny woman, here's a new one. This is the brand new model for the Dark Eldar named character, Lady Malys. Yes, Malys, though I prefer to call her Lady Malys. And this is where it all really goes wrong for Games Workshop, because this has been a super controversial miniature. Now, on the face of it, she looks fine. Nothing exciting, nothing evocative, and because Dark Eldar models have had boobs for ages, she's not even making for good rage bait. In fact, this model got leaked weeks ago, and most people were very unimpressed with the sprue. It hasn't stopped the model from already being sculpted, though. Yes, your eyes do not deceive you. You can pre-order this model right now on eBay for an extortionate price from some random guy in an ExxonMobil truck stop bathroom, who, by the way, doesn't even have the model either. He's in the exact same position as you are, except, you're on your knees. But aside from that, why is the model itself so controversial? Why are people raging about this on the forums and the Reddits and the Twitters and such? Well, because this model basically represents the potential death of Warhammer 40k. And I get that those are really big words, but I'm not kidding. This has opened a real can of worms here, and the community are talking about it, and yeah, I think I might agree with them. The fidelity of Lady Malys of this miniature is good. She has been sculpted very competently. The quality of the miniature is very high, as per usual of most Warhammer miniatures. Creatively speaking, the things I like about this model are I kind of dig her armor. However, this model was clearly copy-pasted from the new Archon and is reusing a ton of assets. So let's be clear as well, this was not a difficult miniature to sculpt and is almost identical to the generic Archon, except, she has some high heels on. And those high heels don't even work very well for the model, in my opinion. It makes her look awkward. And don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of heels in general, especially considering how tiny I am. I'm a little Napoleon. But these ones, they just look awkward. There's just something off about the pose. However, the critical, most devastating criticism of this model that has been leveled almost universally against it by the Warhammer community is that Lady Malys looks incredibly boring. Her face is completely blank, she is devoid of any interesting characterization, she's doing nothing interesting, she represents nothing, she is beige, she is the miniature equivalent of Enya, just sound colored in. She has no posability, no customization. She looks a little bit like Shadowheart from Baldur's Gate 3, but otherwise, she does nothing for anybody. Most people have just shrugged their shoulders at this reveal and made a farting noise with their mouth. The most excitement she has generated is people editing her to make her look better. And well, honestly, succeeding in doing so. Most of the fan edits that I have seen, and there's a lot, have way more character and fit the Drukhari faction far better than the current blank-faced, bored Shadowheart waifu impression. And this wouldn't be a big deal if it was just, a blip, a one-off, a whatever, a who's a what's a. Not every model can be amazing, right? Like sometimes some of them are just boring. Well, that's the problem. This isn't just a blip. It's turning into a trend for Warhammer. We're seeing it more and more and more. Increasingly, new Warhammer miniatures are coming out and they look really dull. For example, we just had the Inquisitor Codiez model that everybody hated. There was also the Blood Angels refresh that everybody hated. The Custodes model from last year that everybody hated. The new Death Watch models have lost a bunch of interesting character compared to the old ones. Hell, the Emperor's Children, the sex, murder, kill Cenobite guys with art that looks like this? They came out as miniatures and they were super bland. How the hell does that happen? Warhammer models are increasingly getting boring because more and more they're missing that thing, that je ne sais quoi that makes Warhammer so quintessentially Warhammer and therefore fucking cool. Because make no bones about it, the thing that sets Warhammer 40k apart from its peers is its style. When Warhammer 40k was invented, it was cobbled together from a ton of different sources. Dune, Moorcock, 2000 AD, and just basically the experience of living in 80s Thatcherite Britain, the most dystopian setting of all, but that big stew pot of sources resulted in a unique style, a whole vibe that has since set Warhammer apart from all its other competitors. And it is this vibe, this sense of aesthetic, that has guaranteed Warhammer's dominance in the wargame market. And that's not just me saying that, it's Games Workshop as well. They have always referred to the Warhammer IP as their most valuable asset, the thing that sets them apart, and they frequently take hugely draconian steps to, as they see it, protect Warhammer. And a massive element of that Warhammer vibe, that Warhammer experience, that Warhammer IP, whatever you want to call it, is yes, the art, and yes, the lore, but also the miniatures and how they're designed. You know, the core Warhammer product. And the models the Games Workshop have been putting out recently are increasingly looking generic. We're getting less Goblin Master sculpts with real character, and more Inquisitor Codiez and bored-looking special characters. And look, okay, some new Warhammer models have looked really cool. The Kill Team Raveners, Krieg artillery teams, Marshal Varnan, hell, the entire Deathcore Krieg release was probably Games Workshop's best for a while, but even they arguably don't look as good as the original Forge World models that came out 20 years ago. And again, I'm not talking about the fidelity of the miniatures or the sharpness of detail, I'm talking about the execution of a grimdark aesthetic and atmosphere when sculpting a miniature. I'm talking about its character. And when it comes to that, there has been a major step down in model sculpting in Warhammer, if not in quality, but in imagination. And it's happening more and more often with each new release. There's always a stinker somewhere, but of all the times to slack on sculpts, now is really not the time, because you, me, Games Workshop, we're all entering a scary new world, and not because of the porn ban, well, maybe a little because of the porn ban, but also because Games Workshop are starting to have a bunch of meaningful competition when it comes to grimdark miniatures. Because 2025 is shaping up to be the year of grimdark miniatures with very cool and dark settings. We already have Trench Crusade, which is launching officially with their physical rulebook later this year. But there's also the brand new game, Conflict 47, from the gaming juggernaut Warlord Games, and that is really shaping up to look very fucking awesome. Based as it is on an alternative Nightmare World War II with lore written by the same people that wrote so much of the best Warhammer 40k lore and rules from the golden age of Midhammer Warhammer. We're talking about Andy Chamber, Gav Thorpe, Rick Priestley, Alessio Cavatore. That is all a killer combo, and frankly, the models that Warlord Games have started turning out for that game are dripping with an evocative aesthetic that I feel Warhammer 40k is starting to lack. I mean, even the new Archon model, which I'm generally okay with, still feels pretty sterile when positioned against the new Vogelspinner miniature with its crouched posable legs and spidery silhouette, or the new German, well, the new German Warlord Games call them the Stahltruppen, but let's be honest, these are German Space Marines. There's another brand of evil Space Marines out there, and frankly, I think these look way cooler than any of the newer Primaris Phobos Space Marine releases as well. And bear in mind that these models are coming out for a game, Conflict 47, that honestly is really good. It was already one of my favorite miniature games, far more fun than Warhammer 40k. I have an entire video about that on my Patreon linked below. Check it out. I mean, I need your support. I'm not actually sponsored by ExxonMobil, and I'm getting restricted on YouTube a lot because of all the blowjob and AIDS jokes. And I'm not stopping though. I'm gonna keep doing those. But just like an unsuspecting hitchhiker at 3 a.m. in an ExxonMobil truck station, I think the Games Workshop are in for a really rough ride soon. Especially if they're going to keep turning out models that look like these. You know, they look fine, but they just don't really seem to be exciting many people. Models that are perfunctory. I mean, where's my Archon? Archon wearing a human face. You just don't really get that often from Warhammer anymore. I don't know, maybe we need more Chaos models to be released that don't look like Night Lords. And it could be because sculptors just aren't sticking around in Games Workshop these days, which frankly, I don't really blame them for. In the 2020s, now if you're a sculptor with a ton of vision and you want to make miniatures, you don't need to work for Games Workshop in order to break into the miniature wargame sculpting industry like you did in the 90s and 2000s. Instead, it's just better to go independent, sculpt models and sell them online digitally, or team up with one of the many 3D printing companies out there and likely get paid a whole lot better than you would at Games Workshop. And also, you'll get credited for your work. I mean, why would you even want to sculpt for Games Workshop when clearly they don't respect creatives? Well, the answer is, I don't think many sculptors are sticking with Games Workshop anymore or even going to work for them. Or if they are with Games Workshop, they want to work in the Age of Sigmar division. I mean, we already know from internal leaks and employee testimony that many of the sculptors that work at Games Workshop are desperate to try to get into the Age of Sigmar team rather than work with the Warhammer 40k franchise. Because working on Warhammer 40k these days is perceived to be really boring, as you're forced as a sculptor into turning out an endless conveyor belt of Space Marines standing on rocks and pointing at things. And that is genuine. That's killing creatives at Warhammer, and I think it's hurting the overall model design. And as a result, that foundation, that's their competition. That's how they're selling these things. That's how they're continuing to make Warhammer relevant. So if they can't do that, then the next year is looking pretty rough for Games Workshop, and by the end of it, Warhammer 40k could be over. Not in a the game is dead kind of way, but more in the dominance of the franchise might just be lessened, which would probably be good for miniature wargaming, but clearly it's undesirable for Games Workshop. But if you appreciate this fight against corporate monopoly in our hobby spaces and weekly videos talking about news and critiquing the corpo monopolies of our hobby and try to support independent games and creators, please check out my Patreon, because YouTube has basically crashed content creators' income and views, and that has really impacted my channel as well. So I'm just relying on Patreon these days to keep this whole thing going. So please do check it out for bonus videos, live streams, and a cool hobby community, which has its very own illicit porn section. Not in a sex trafficking way, just more like, I don't know, inflation, furries. So thanks so much to my patrons who support the channel, especially CryptoKev, and I'll catch you all next time. Bye-bye.